just answering questions with waptek. This will be concerning someone asking some questions and also making some assertions or opinions on what happened to a person who died the day after the attack on the Capitol that was perpetrated by a group of people that made no secret who they were associated with and who they were. It doesn't matter what propaganda gets spit out. I don't have to listen to it, neither should you. On or at or before 10 p.m., after the riot had subsided, a police officer who had been involved in trying to defend the Capitol and had been knocked around and sprayed with pepper spray texted his brother that he had been attacked with pepper spray, says 2 times, might have been bear spray, we don't know, and he was in good condition. This was just before 10 p.m. on the 6th of the month. This is a timeline as best I can construct it. There's a reason I said that. After he'd returned to his division office, and 8 hours after he was sprayed approximately, he collapsed and was taken to a hospital in the D.C. area. The next day, unknown timing, because each of the family members report different times. They either heard it through the grapevine or had to call the hospital by finding it to find out what's going on with their relative, son, brother, whatever. Or they were contacted directly. It's a mix-mash, but that day, sometime, the family was told that he had gotten a blood clot, it caused a stroke, and he was on a ventilator. And before the family members could arrive or even respond or give permission or be consulted about it, he had already died by 9:30 p.m. the next day, which means within a 1-day period, 24 hours almost exactly, he went from being able to text message his brother, that was his last one apparently, to dead. 10 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. the next day, approximately. His family members hadn't arrived, and I'm going to read this back a little bit differently. A blood clot that is not from an impact to the head traveled into his brain, so it could have been an impact anywhere else, or it could have been a pre-existing condition knocked loose, but it has to be related to the attack. He was bounced around and shoved and beaten up too, okay? That's the most likely. But he didn't mention that. But let's assume for a second, for argument's sake, that it was a blood clot that got knocked loose or was caused by something the day before. This is pretty consistent on timing. About 8 hours afterwards, a clot hit his brain and he collapsed at his workplace. By the next day, they had determined it was a clot, probably by x-raying or scanning his head, and he had a stroke because they could see the clot in his head. Could have came from anywhere in your body that has blood flow going towards the brain. There's several places this could happen. Not necessarily in your arm or leg, but those are actually possible. Most likely one that I've heard of, you'd have to look this up, are locations within the central part of the body, like the lungs. Being put on a ventilator is done either because A, you can't breathe at all because of brain damage, or B, other. There isn't any indication of other, so he was on a ventilator because his brain wasn't sending signals to make his diaphragm inflate his lungs. That's a reasonable assumption. And then by 9:30, almost exactly 24 hours after this all happened, well, really, 8 hours after he was sprayed, 10 p.m., that is approximately the same timing. So we're going to call it less than 24 hours after he collapsed from brain being injured by a clot. Obviously, at this point, it was a clot. He died. Why? Was he taken off a ventilator or something? Now I'm going to bring up something pretty simple here. If your brain is damaged enough you can't breathe, a similar part of the brain, not exactly, is responsible for telling the heart to pump. And a heart will pump without the signal from the brain for a period of time. I don't know what the timing is. I'd have to go look it up. But the point is that sinus rhythm is maintained by and initiated by nerves. And if you have enough brain damage, your heart doesn't pump. We now have the situation where you are sitting there doing chest compressions or maybe electrically stimulating the heart for a person who is not able to breathe on their own and has no pulse on their own. That is the definition of dead, along with the brain being damaged enough to do it. That is the point beyond which you are not viable in a ridiculously high portion of cases. I, for a while, had a DNR. a do not resuscitate notice. That unless it was easy to resuscitate me, don't bother, because I don't want to be just laying there for 2 weeks while you figure out what to do with me. Now, I have one that says, do not maintain heroic or life-saving procedures more than a certain number of time. It's currently set to 2 weeks. This note's in my wallet. I carry it everywhere I go. I'm a donor. I do not need a person maintaining me except for maintaining those body parts or salvaging me. The time period I found, this is a generic one, at one point was 2 weeks. No more than 2 weeks. Why? Because beyond that point, anything salvageable out of me for someone else's benefit is going to start failing, and I have almost no chance of being recovered. If my heart's still pumping, but the brain is clearly destroyed, or is non-functional, or there's no real brainwave activity, part me out. It wasn't 2 days later. It was literally less than 24 hours later, probably, that this all happened, and I don't believe he was taken off the ventilator, because the most likely scenario here is he was declared dead because his heart stopped. If you have a clot in your brain that can stop you from breathing, this can also lead to brain damage enough that you can't pump blood anymore. Sitnik's brother was interviewed on the 8th, the day after, by ProPublica, which apparently is where people are getting an interview with information in it. His mom, by a month and several weeks later, had to deny publicly he was struck on the head. He wasn't hit on the head. We think he had a stroke. And even then, she didn't have all the data. Anybody claiming to have all of the data before then is doing the whole, I got a whistleblower at the hospital thing, or they're quoting a page, but they can't really tell you where it is, which is bullshit. Do we have any better information? Funny thing is, you can look at Wikipedia revisions, and we don't. This is the best data we have. And the family has stated that they do not want his death publicized, quote-unquote. Meaning there may not be any information. Even an autopsy might not give you a clear idea of what exactly happened. The chart recording system for the respirator and the heart monitor would be more useful at this point. Do we have a right to this information? If the family members say no, we don't. I think that's reckless and stupid, but they can do what they want to. They have a right. We do not have a right to demand. If I die and my family doesn't want to release the information, you're not allowed to bitch them out. And we're not allowed to bitch out your family if they don't want to release the information if something happens to you. So mom doesn't know over a month later. His brother only knows a few pieces of information the day after his brother dies. That's our base of data. Any other data, link it below. Or give me the actual keywords to find it very definitively. Next, I was looking at for a particular article which gave information on how this man died. He was in an interview with his brother. He communicated twice by text, getting checked for inhaling pepper spray, something similar. He was fine, be heading home soon. Next text, gotten very sleepy and was going to lay down for a nap. I didn't see any reference to that anywhere. But okay. And also the interview the next day, which is the last day, he didn't mention it. But maybe he did. I don't believe he ever woke up. He was put on a respirator to keep him breathing. After 2 days, they decided to shut the breathing machine off. No, they didn't. His heart stopped. That's the most likely scenario, and there's no indication they disconnected him. His family would have been required to do it, or he would have had to have a medical alert bracelet or card, or a DNR card that says, if there's high likelihood of me not being salvageable, do not maintain artificial respiration or life-saving procedures or life support. I know that because I signed off the waiver myself, so I know about this. Lots of cops do this, other cops don't. I'm going to say everything sounds conspiratorial. The possibility of foul play does not escape me. But I'm the crazy guy, right? You just misquoted how long he was on a respirator, and he was not disconnected. And no, this isn't foul play. This is a family who has the right to say we're not giving out information that should have definitively found out the accurate information, because only a family member can say, I'm going to make you give me the charts, and I'm going to make you give me all the facts, because people are lying about my damn dead son or my brother. Give me the information. Don't argue, or I will publicize your refusing to give me the facts. Thank you for the information. Take it to a person who's an expert in the subject. Time and date, stamp everything. This is when his heart stopped. This is when his breathing stopped. This is when he was put on the respirator, and he died. He was declared dead after that point because non-salvageable. And by the time they got there, he had already died. Now, they could have kept pumping air into his lungs, but the blood isn't pumping. They have to hook him up to an automatic chest compression machine or keep doing compressions or electrically stimulate the heart. If they would have tried to resuscitate him or restart the heart. If it doesn't restart on its own and maintain its own sinus rhythm, you have to literally stick a cable in there and just hotwire him. And he may have had a DNR. Now, you're not the crazy person, but you are not reading the information I was able to find pretty quickly. But let's continue. That whole day stinks. There were bad acting Trumpers there, not predominantly so. The absolute majority of people who attacked the Capitol are not the majority of people who went to the rally. It's true. But you're ignoring the fact that 100% of them were people who did this at the behest of Donald Trump, overtly and covertly through his people who talked that day. They rabble-roused them, and they did exactly what they were told to do. And everybody's acknowledged that except for the people who are guilty of rabble-rousing them. But let's not defend the subject. No, it wasn't BLM, and no, it wasn't Antifa. Let's get that out of the way if you're going to bring that up, but he hasn't done that. If they're going to jail and beat the Trumpers, no one say to let them alone, then haul the rest of the costume running with the script and Capitol Police who were involved in making some of the fake footage. You're in denial of what an individual political party was willing to do after they lost an election. Period. A cop got half-assed, after half-assed acting, got a medal. Again, you're in denial of what happened because you can't handle that an entire portion of the population supports the actions of a violent, traitorous mob trying to invalidate my vote and yours, if necessary. If anyone in Congress is involved, deal them too. All of the three-letter orgs lump them in as well for not giving fair warning and then attending and breaching the Capitol too. They didn't do that. This was done exclusively by Trump supporters. The only libtards you can find in the group were recently converted liberals that immediately converted back to being conservatives right afterwards. They were conveniently false flagging as liberals. But you could say a tiny portion of 3 people were not part of Al-Qaeda, but the majority of people who did this were. And no, it wasn't 3-letter agencies or cops in disguise or Antifa or BLM. You're in denial. My intuition says lots of people knew that it was going to happen. Whether you agree with me or not, that does not matter. But what does matter is that you see I have nothing to gain at all, but a label upon me for having my 2 cents worth. I speak it as I see it. Donald Trump lost the election. The losing side tried to interfere with the final process where Mike Pence was legally compelled by tradition and by Congress and by the Constitution as vice president to read back the votes that proved he was fired as well. A group of people tried to interfere with this who are elected officials who are guilty of this on the Trump side who are interfering with it, but it's legal for them to get away with it, but they can't actually win at it, invalidating entire states' votes because they don't like the outcome. And a group of people from outside breached the building and did these things, and you're in denial of it. I found something while searching for that article, a compendium of videos about rioters. I think the answers lay within that because it's BLM and Antifa fighting and stuff. The rioters that attacked that day are guilty. A particular side is guilty. Not everything has to be even. No, it's not just like Antifa and BLM. They're actually much worse as far as rioting. That's true. You are in denial of what happened, and you're trying to blame victims here. And I'm going to say it. And no, it's not how you see it, it's how you want it to be. You misquoted the time delay between the guy getting injured, put on a ventilator, and dying. You made it sound as if they disconnected him, and you acting as if this was somehow him being killed as a sacrificial lamb. I'm really tired of hearing this shit. I live in a country where I have an entire half of the population that does this. Good day. Thanks for watching. Good luck with all.